Welcome to the podcast, Whiskey and a Map. Stories of adventure and expeditions as told by those who live them. I'm your host, Michael Reinhart. It has been said that many adventures and expeditions start simply with a map and a glass of whiskey. A desire to go and see the world's wild places. You're invited to pull up a chair, pour yourself a glass of your favorite whiskey, and join us as we hear stories from another one of our friends just returned from the field. Our guest today is Matthew Marriott. Matthew is a British explorer, researcher, and geographer. He is a fellow of the Royal Geographic Society and a fellow of the Royal Asiatic Society. His expeditions include walking across Queensland, Australia, traversing the Sahara on camel, and retracing his great-great-grandfather's Challenger expedition to Christmas Island in the Indian Ocean. Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for inviting me on, Michael. Great to be on the show.
You come from a long line of famous explorers and are carrying on in that tradition with expeditions around the world. But before we get to them, we have a traditional icebreaker. Do you have a good drinking story for us?
I absolutely have. I have a couple of drinking stories, but I think I'm going to use the one when I was in the Sahara. So I just arrived on the edge of the Moroccan Sahara. We just put our equipment down in some Berber tents, and there was a couple who were there, and a Norwegian couple, and it turned out that they were actually ski expeditioners in the Arctic in Norway, and they just decided that they sort of wanted to contrast the Sahara with the kind of, I guess, the cold desert of the Arctic and the ice that's up in the Arctic. So, and he just said to me, there's one thing that's very difficult traveling around North Africa. So I said, what is that? And he said, I just really, really miss having a beer. So we luckily, we had a really good guide with us from the Atlas Mountains. He traveled with us all over Morocco, and he knew of the only place to buy beer near the Sahara. So we picked up a few beers. We had this sort of magical evening under the canopy of the stars in the Sahara, drinking this Casablanca beer. It was just a fantastic moment, and just hearing stories about the Arctic, funnily enough, even though we're in the Sahara, which is quite unusual. But really, an unusual place to have a drink with someone, and a fantastic backdrop to clinking beers together. So yeah,
very cool. Yeah, that's a long way from the Arctic.
Yeah, a long way up.
Exploration is in your blood. You have a family going back many generations that have been involved in exploration, adventure, scientific study abroad. A couple I'd like to ask you about is Sir John Murray and Captain J.P.R. Marriott. Tell us about those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's always been something in my family that we've had. Sir John Murray he's my great-great-grandfather, and he was really a sort of pioneer, or in scientific pioneer, and that he's called, certainly in the UK, he's called the founding father of oceanography. They set off on, the sort of world-famous Challenger expedition. The Challenger expedition travelled all around the world, surveying the oceans. Challenger Deep, which you may have heard of in the Mariana Trench, is the deepest point on an ocean and Earth, and that was discovered by my great-great-grandfather. And once they returned to the UK, they shared the scientific work, but they collected hundreds, if not thousands, of specimens from all around the world, and greatly enriching our understanding of the natural world. Just an incredible figure, alongside all those other characters like Darwin, who went all around the world seeking, to enrich our scientific understanding of it. So part of that is he came across an island called Christmas Island, which is in the Indian Ocean, which is just south of sort of Jakarta and north of Perth in Australia. So And I'll probably talk a little bit more about Christmas Island later on. And then again, my great-grandfather, who married the daughter of Sir John Murray, Captain Marriott, he travelled the world through the Navy. And after he retired from the Navy, he had various diplomatic roles around the world, including in Egypt and Japan. So just incredible sort of tales of travel and sort of exploration that have passed through generations of my family in very different eras, completely different worlds to, what we have in the present day, going on back hundreds of years. But it's greatly shaped, a yearning to travel and, as times have changed so much, but I think it's a shared thing throughout humanity that you have this burning desire to travel and explore and kind of, interact with parts of the world that enrich your knowledge of the world. So, yeah.
It's in your blood.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Your journey started with an around-the-world trip. And during that trip, it took you to Australia and Queensland. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was very young at the time, and it was really my first foray after doing many exams through my education at school and so on. And so I went on a round-the-world trip of circumnavigation, taking me to all kinds of places, including China and the Far East, and then later Australia. And Australia is really where I really do feel that about Australia, that it's this, you could spend your whole life traveling around Australia. There's so much there. I mean, the landmass of Australia is about the same size as Europe, and there's just so much to explore there, and so much biodiversity in the wildlife, and it's just an incredible place. But when I was at that age, I actually became deeply interested in the Aboriginal First Nations people and some of the wildlife in the Queensland area. And Queensland is sort of northeast Australia, and there's a stretch of land called Mission Beach. And in Mission Beach is the traditional owners of that area, the traditional people of that area were the Djiru people. And the Djiru had an incredible way of living, and that they discovered a way of effectively paralyzing fish to catch them. So there's some bark and sap from a tree called the milky pine tree, and if you use that bark and sap and throw it into the water, temporarily paralyzes the fish. So that this is sort of, like the fishing technique that the Djiru people had, which is unique to the area, and just incredible, cultural heritage there. The rainforest is incredible in that area of Mission Beach as well. The cassowary, I was fascinated. So the cassowary, for the audience, is the largest land bird in Australia, and it's like a very large emu with a sort of velociraptor-like claw. And if you confront it at the wrong time, it can be absolutely fatal. But it's you have to be very cautious if you see one. And they are quite rare now, but it's an incredible bird, and not a bird you'll forget if you see one. So, but it's but an incredible area of Australia, very incredible biodiversity in the rainforest, and just very wonderful way of interacting with that part of Queensland with the Djiru people. So I think we talked about previously, Michael. We talked about the First Nations belief in the dream world. So the dream world is this sort of difficult for someone who's not an Aboriginal person to understand, but it's effectively. Dream time existed since time began, and there were spirits that created the rivers, streams, water holes, the lay of the land, and the ancestors to the Aboriginal people passed the knowledge through many generations. the dream world is this sort of the beginning of time that created this successive development of knowledge and passing down of knowledge from the ancestors to the present Aboriginal people. So it's incredibly important culturally and spiritually. And the other thing, songlines. So songlines are these geographical places and journeys that the Aborigines can make, can be sung, and they have there are rituals connected with the singing of the journey between different geographical places. And it's an incredibly, different perspective from, say the Western philosophy, and just a very, very rich and bold view of the world and the creation of the world that this really struck me as a young kind of traveller, that I was really amazed by the Djiru and the stories they told and the way they interacted with the land and their beliefs about the land. So yeah, it's a very, very much an early beginning kind of way, but it really struck me. It's an incredible part of Australia and of the world.
And to get a glimpse into their spiritual beliefs and practices with the dream world, that must have been really something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's if you've seen just going onto the internet, you can research the dream world and sort of paintings and illustrations of the dream world by the Aboriginal First Nations people, and just some incredible things there. So like illustrations of the sky at night and things, and this kind of intertwining of astronomy with the dream world and things like that. Just the incredible. Some incredible art there, and it's a very interesting concept, and one I definitely recommend reading up on.
Fascinating. You speak many languages. One of them is Arabic, and you went to Cairo to live. Tell us about that.
Already mentioned my great-grandfather, Captain Marriott, was very much involved in a diplomatic sense with Egypt. I guess I could describe it at first. So there's a Nobel Prize winner for literature called Naguib Mahfouz, and he wrote a famous quote that being in Cairo is like being in the middle of nowhere and everywhere. And it's if you've been to Cairo, you kind of you know what Naguib Mahfouz means by that. It's such a huge, bustling city. It's it's the largest city in Africa. I stayed in Mohandasin, which means engineers in Arabic, and it was traditionally where the engineers and professionals would live in Cairo. I worked as a teacher, and through that I was teaching people from all over the Middle East, North Africa, and East Africa. It was really a fascinating insight into the sort of linguistic variety in Africa and the Middle East, and just being able to, I spent a lot of time learning Arabic, and also picked up some other dialects like Tigrinian, Amharic, and just some very interesting dialects that had come from all over that region. And it was just Egyptology fascinated me, so I visited many tombs. I mean, the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx are the obvious ones that people visit, but there's a lot of other sites not too far from Cairo which are incredibly interesting from an Egyptology perspective. And the building where I worked was also where the Egypt Exploration Society was based. And they've got the best Egyptologists from sort of Western Europe working there, and also Egyptian Egyptologists who work alongside each other and sort of recording, the sort of latest developments in Egyptology. So it's an incredible place to be, and very different time when it was sort of Mubarak era. I was there, and it was just before the Arab Spring. So there was tension in some parts of Egyptian society, but there was a lot of good stuff as well there. So it was kind of an interesting time to be there.
I bet it was. While you were there, my understanding is you had an interesting experience visiting a pyramid.
Yeah, I went to visit the pyramids, and the Egyptian army kindly allowed me to climb up several steps of the Great Pyramid for some photographs, because they want to ensure that tourists have a great time. And if you ask them politely, and if it's the right day to do it, they will help you out. So being on the Great Pyramid, it has this incredible. It's a symbol recognized throughout the world. And it has this incredible kind of, I guess, sort of, it's this iconic mark of civilization, and I can't quite describe exactly what I mean, but I think it's not like standing on stone. It's like you're standing on something monumental in history, that there's something, incredible about being on that monument. I was very privileged that the Egyptian army allowed me to walk up it and took some photographs, but it's, it is an incredible place. And, if you find yourself in Egypt and the tourism police or the army are willing, then ask them for a photograph, because it's a really magical experience being on such a historic, piece of civilization.
Quite a privilege. You've traveled quite extensively. Have there ever been occasions when it was high danger and you almost didn't make it back?
So I think, I share this with all people that have traveled, and, a lot of the world. And it's, there's been several occasions where that sort of thing has happened. So, like things like road safety issues. So being on mountain roads, when you're going in one direction, someone's coming fast in the other direction, and you have to veer around them, or maybe you don't veer around them, maybe you collide, or maybe one of you goes off the side of the mountain. And that's a big fear, especially the Atlas Mountains in Morocco. That was a big fear. And it was I was with a guide, and he said, Inshallah. And that was his insurance policy. And it was quite risky, going on those mountain roads. But more other sort of, to contrast that. So I've been in sort of protests and riots in the sort of MENA region, where it's been, you get caught up in it and you're trying to get out, but it's not easy to find a way out. And it can get, those sort of situations, they're not predictable. It's not like someone knows when these things are always going to happen, but it's kind of, you've just got to keep your wits about you and move to a place of safety as soon as possible. I'm being very fortunate, and I guess I made it through those times. But that's that is in the nature of adventure and exploration and travel, that you do find these situations present themselves. But it's getting through to a place of safety and minimizing the risk. So minimizing the risk of those situations, that is, essential to having a successful trip or a successful expedition.
Take us to Christmas Island.
Yeah, so Christmas Island. So just picking up on that, in my great-great-grandfather, they were on the Challenger expedition, and they came past Christmas Island. And he found a lot of made some scientific discoveries of the types of materials on that island. And my family sort of had a connection to the island for a long time. And so just before the pandemic, I went out there to visit it. I'd heard about these places that were named after members of my family, and I'd also heard it was just an incredible island with such a rich biodiversity. So Christmas Island is in the Indian Ocean. It's south of Indonesia, north of Perth, and it's effectively a volcanic spike coming out of the ocean floor. And because it's a volcanic spike, many of the species of animals and plants have evolved independently from other, say, Indonesia or Australia. So you get all these endemic species, like the golden bosun, which is only found on Christmas Island, and the golden bosun, which is on the flag for Christmas Island, is this incredibly beautiful tropical bird. And in my view, it's one of the most beautiful birds in the world. So if anyone does go to Christmas Island, do try and catch a glimpse of the golden bosun. But I was there walking through the rainforest. So you travel everywhere by 4-wheel drive, and I was there in the rainforest, looking at these giant trees which are unique to Christmas Island. Looking up at the canopy of the rainforest, and then looking down again at my feet and seeing thousands of red crab going through the rainforest towards the ocean. The thing that, nature programs will film this crab migration that goes on in Christmas Island, and there's I think it's something like 60 million red crab take over the island at the end of the year. So they go to the sea, they spawn their babies, and then they return inland. And there's no way you can go without seeing a crab at this time of year. So it's like it's done on the lunar calendar, and when the moon rises, they go and lay their babies in the ocean. So it's just an incredible sight. It's a natural wonder, and it's a unique place, and it's kind of, you can sit on a veranda overlooking a moonlit sea at night, and there'll be all the red crab will be around your feet, walking around your feet and stuff. And if you don't shut the door to your house, you're going to have red crab following inside as well. So it's a very unique place, but it is incredibly worthwhile visiting, and somewhere I'll be visiting again soon.
How did it feel stepping in the same place as Sir John Murray?
Yeah, well, it's incredible, really, because, they travelled round so much of the world on a sort of 19th century boats, and to have come across Christmas Island in that day, it would have been quite a sight. It was uninhabited, it had never had any human, it was just the crabs, and that was pretty much it on the island they would have seen. So no development, no human interaction with the island. Yes, so for me to visit there as his great-great-grandson, and it's just incredible to learn, the founding of the island, the human settlement on the island, the development over from the 19th to the 20th century, into the 21st century. But it's, there are place names named after John Murray. So Murray Road is a major road on the island. And there's Margaret Knoll, which is a beautiful place to watch golden bosons, which I mentioned earlier, and bird watching generally. So frigate birds are another great sight on the island. It's a beautiful viewpoint above the rainforest. That's Margaret Knoll. It's named after my great-grandmother. And there's a beach named after a great aunt as well. So it's just it's a very unique place to my family, but it's an incredible biological treasure as well. It's just a fantastic place. And I think as a naturalist, my great-great-grandfather would have just been in awe of that island. It would have been, in that era, in the Darwinian era, that just to find somewhere with all these unique species of plants and flora and fauna, just an incredible island to find.
Sounds like the Galapagos of the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, I think it has been called that. Yeah, certainly. And it's just an incredible place.
Were there any other strange animals that you saw there?
So there's a robber crab. So the red crabs are the ones that take over the island due to migration, but there's a robber crab, and they're also known as the coconut crab because they can crush coconuts with their claws. They've got very big claws, and they aren't unique to Christmas Island. They are found, I believe in the Pacific. and other places as well. But they're these huge crabs, and when you cross one, they're quite phenomenal. They're these large robber crabs that appear in front of you with these huge claws, and they're very slow, which is fortunate. So they're very slow moving. So if they got your sort of arm or leg in the grasp of their claw, they probably break it. So it's not to be taken too lightly, and they are protected actually on the island. So when you're driving on a road, because there are 60 million red crabs, it's inevitable that you might drive over one or two of them. But the robber crab you have to avoid at all costs because it's a protected species on the island. So, but it's a formidable crab.
I want to switch gears. Let's talk about British exploration. You have people like Sir Richard Burton, Ernest Shackleton. I mean, there is just a depth of explorers that Britain has produced, including your own relatives. How would you compare Burton, Speke, Shackleton, Murray to today's explorers?
Well, I think it's different eras, different times, and different circumstances. And I think today it's we're a more globalized world. So I think you don't have to be suddenly British or European to be to explore. You can be from anywhere in the world, from any people, and you can go and explore. But it's so that's the big change. But it's the other thing I'd say is that I think exploration is a human endeavor, and it's something that binds all human beings, that we have this yearning to discover more and to find out more. And I think the explorers today are covering a lot of different issues. So, for example, Shackleton, the polar explorers of old were trying to reach the furthest extremes known that are being physically reached by humankind. But today we're looking at things like the challenges of climate change, the effects. So people there are polar scientists going to the polar regions, measuring the melting of glaciers, the melting of polar ice. They're making discoveries and they're contributing to science, but they're not pushing the physical endurance boundaries that the old polar explorers like Shackleton were. And so, yeah, it's different. And there's still some great the ocean. There's so much to be explored in the ocean. There's so little we know about large swathes of the ocean, and there's a lot going into ocean exploration. And then we've got space, and that's beyond. The large 99% of the population aren't going to get to experience that in our generations, but it's there's still spaces like a huge. So I think that's something in the days of Speke and Shackleton and Richard Francis Burton. Space just wasn't even a consideration, but now we're putting astronauts into space, finding out so much more scientifically and outside of our own planet. And I think that's how exploration has changed so much in those centuries. But yeah.
With all that though, as individuals, is there really any difference between Burton and the explorers such as yourself now?
So I think what Richard Francis Burton, the great gift he had, was to question what was considered, socially acceptable, and to actually question our opinions of various parts of the world and the people in them. That he was out there, he was exploring, he was meeting people, he was finding new geographical areas, and he was coming back to Victorian Britain, and there were societal expectations of what he would say about these places, but he actually challenged a lot of ideas and pushed forward, geographical knowledge and sort of anthropological knowledge as well. So it was but it's a different era, and there's many of his views would be deemed unacceptable today. But it's, I think there's still a thing if you're into traveling, exploring, pursuing an adventure, then it's about, in the same through all generations, all centuries, you have to have that, questioning something so you can discover something. So don't go out somewhere expecting to find everything you thought you would find. Look for something new, look to discover something.
And it always opens up our worldview, allows us to question, I guess, things that we always assumed and find out that it's not 100% correct and allow us to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, the future of exploration, and this goes to a particular expertise of yours, artificial intelligence. How do you think that's going to affect the future of exploration?
So I think that's one of the exciting things about being in the 21st century. So, there's many generations of travelers and explorers, expeditioners have asked questions about the world or asked questions about history. So they may want to rediscover something, but we haven't had it within our grasp to find things. So things have just gone unfound, and we haven't been able to discover locations of historical events. So with artificial intelligence, it's now within our grasp to use tools such as machine learning we can collect data, and then we can predict where the likely places of maybe a historical figure, historical tomb, a resting place of a famous historical figure might be that we weren't able to do before. So just one example of that is the burial place of Genghis Khan. This is a huge mystery, and no one's got close to finding it. But, with breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and with the ability to assimilate data of things like where Genghis Khan's travel routes were, where he was resting, where his troops would rest, it becomes easier to create a picture of a likely resting place. So, archaeologically, AI can really change things, and it's a really exciting time to be in that, opens up these things. And there are other examples as well. So glyph reading. So traditionally, you'd have a handful of hieroglyph experts in either Mayan glyphs or ancient Egyptian glyphs. They would be able to read like the inside of a tomb. But with AI, you can now do image recognition, and even using your mobile phone, you can read some of these glyphs and go through a huge thousands of glyphs to identify the correct translation on the inside of the tomb. So it's really exciting technology. There's lots of possibilities, and there's lots of universities and societies all around the world that are starting to embrace this and doing some really exciting expeditions. So, really cool.
Fascinating. What lessons have you learned through all of your explorations, your travels?
I think it's just to have a clear idea of what you're trying to achieve. So, if you're trying to discover something completely new, if you're trying to rediscover something, so some ancient knowledge that might have been passed down through generations of a tribe that you're trying to understand, and it might be that you're rediscovering a historical moment, but it's just having a clear idea in your travel or your expedition or an adventure, have a clear idea set out of what you're trying to achieve and how it's going to benefit, your community, maybe your country, maybe the world, the academic world, if, you've got academic training. So it's kind of having a clear idea of what you're trying to achieve, and then that kind of makes everything fit together more nice and gives purpose. I think there's a lot of people that it's just you want to have an adventure, but there's no purpose there. And I think, it's nice sometimes to have that adrenaline rush on a trip, or canoeing down a river But if you give it purpose, if you give it a scientific kind of, you're trying to make a discovery for the betterment of science, it really kind of elevates your ability to explore, ability to travel, ability to reach out to other parts of the world that have different perspectives and can enrich our own. So it's I think that's the main learning I have.
How would you compare yourself from the early days when you were walking through Queensland, trying to avoid the Queensland velociraptor, and yourself now? How would you compare those two people?
Well, I think I've got this thing about having a holistic view of your travel. So I think when you're very young, as everybody is when they're young, there's lots of, there might be a lot of selfies and there might be a lot of star jumps on nice locations and things. And, as young people do when you're a late teenager, early 20-something. But as you get older, the more you travel, you start to see the whole picture of what's going on. So you might see a bustling tourist industry, but then you see other parts of the community that are suffering that you hadn't that not everyone is seeing. So it's getting a holistic idea of the picture and being respectful of where you are, but also observing, that kind of whole, what's really going on here and what are some learnings. I've traveled across the world to this place, and what can I learn from it, and what can I bring home and share with my colleagues and my contemporaries about this area. So I think that's the big difference from being young, when you're very blissfully ignorant of really the whole picture of what's going on, to having that eternal optimism, and actually getting older and actually seeing a big cross section of the place you're in. So I think that's a big learning for getting older as a traveler.
Now, what's coming up next for you?
So I actually, in the immediate future, sort of early next year, I'm going to some Etruscan, sort of the sites of some Etruscan towns and villages in just near Bologna in Italy. So Richard Francis Burton documented them, and he was a diplomat in the region. And there's just an incredible amount about the Etruscans that I'd like to discover, and some great academics who work at local museums in Bologna as well, who I want to meet up with. So that's kind of next step. Later next year, I really want to do something in northern India and Nepal in the Himalayas. So that's kind of a bigger trip. It's going to take a lot more planning, but yeah.
And when's that going to happen?
So it's probably October to December next year. So that's you get all the blue skies in Nepal at that time of year. So it's kind of the preference at the moment.
For folks who want to follow you and your travels and the things that you learn, where can they do that?
So probably the easiest is to visit my Linktree page. So either you can go on Instagram. So my Instagram handle is Matthew Marriott. So it's MATTHEW MARRIOTT. So Matthew Marriott, that's my Instagram handle. And there's a link on there, a Linktree link, which will link you to all things like podcasts, lectures that I'm giving in the UK, that kind of thing. And my Linktree handle is it's linktr.ee/Matthew Marriott, same spelling as the Instagram. So if you visit either of those, if you visit me on Instagram, you can keep up with sort of the latest projects and trips and stuff, and reach out and
Any final thoughts?
No, just great to get in contact with you, Michael, and thanks so much for having me on the show. And it's an incredible show. I've seen some of the other and some other fellows of the Royal Geographic Society on previous episodes, which I've listened to, and just incredible podcast show and series, and just a huge range of, some incredible stories there. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you. Well, Matthew, I hope to have you back after a few more of your ventures, and especially to hear about India and about the Etruscans.
Thanks so much, Michael. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you down the road.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you down the road when we get together again, share a glass of whiskey, and hear more stories of adventure as told by those who live them. Until then, check us out at michaeljreinhart.com, where you'll find more of my work as an adventure photojournalist. Photos, videos, and articles of interesting people, mysterious places, and exotic cultures from the wild places of the world.